Thank you so much, John, for that generous introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you for this special edition of Democracy Dialogues, one of the hallmark initiatives of the Democratic Engagement Exchange, and the Faculty of Arts, of course, at Toronto Metropolitan University. I want to begin by recognizing John Beebe and his team for their leadership in building this remarkable platform. Over the years, Democracy Dialogues, the series, has really created a space where ideas meet action and where people from different backgrounds come together to explore what democracy looks like, not just in theory, but in practice. And so in our communities and in our daily lives, and how important the idea of democracy and democracy itself really is. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from the 2025-2026 Obama Foundation Scholars, who I had the privilege of meeting, a global cohort of inspiring individuals who are confronting some of the most complex challenges of our time. So tonight we have Victoria and Michelle and Khalid here with us. And I have to say a special shout out to Victoria because she's a member of our own TMU community. So congratulations to all three of you, but that's pretty special. These scholars really represent something that resonates deeply with TMU's mission, the belief that leadership is not about position or about power. And this really resonates with me. It's really about purpose and connection with communities, and the courage to drive change and to try to make a difference every day when we show up here. As President Obama said, we're living through a political crisis of the sort that we haven't seen before around the world and here in Canada. We're witnessing rising polarization, declining trust in institutions, where people are really trying to do good for society, and sometimes that doesn't really show. And growing fatigue with political systems that often feel distant from the daily lives of us, people, regular people. It can be easy to become discouraged, to step back, or to feel that our individual voices really don't matter or don't make a difference. But gatherings like this remind us that democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a shared responsibility, and I would add, it's a privilege to be part of a democracy. It depends on people showing up, people speaking up, and participating in the work that really shape our societies. And we're lucky in Canada to be able to do that, right? We're lucky to be able to vote, and to exercise that right is of the utmost importance if you want to make change. Democracy, however, doesn't only happen during elections. It lives in community organizing, in public service, in education, and in storytelling, and in everyday acts of listening and empathy and dialogue, real dialogue. That's two-sided, that strengthen our shared civic life. We see that spirit reflected in movements for climate action, Indigenous rights, gender equity, which is something that's really, really important for this provost, racial justice, and fair governance. These movements demonstrate that democracy endures when people refuse to give up on each other, which is also really important, even though when it feels like we should or we want to. When we continue to believe that voices and actions can make a difference, That's the spirit embodied by the Obama Foundation scholars. And it's the same spirit we strive to nurture at TMU, even in difficult moments. For democracy to thrive, it requires participation, not just from experts or elected officials, but from each of us. And that's the spirit of democracy. I used to be a long time ago, a student of classics. I wanted to work in Greece and Rome. Not a bad gig, huh? That would have been pretty good. And I was a student of history. And so when you look back, you see democratic engagement in those societies, and we can learn a lot from history. What to do, but also what not to do, clearly. So democracy really asks us to bring curiosity, integrity, compassion, empathy to our classrooms, to our offices, to our workplaces, to our communities, and to see disagreement that we see every day, not as division, but as an opportunity to learn from each other. To our students here this evening, I'm sure there's some of you, your voices matter. They matter on this campus. Whether you engage through policy, research, art, we've seen a lot of that as well. I had a real privilege of going, I go every year to the Image Center, our beautiful Image Center on campus. I don't know if you've been, if you haven't, you should go. Where students represent, or through art, through photography in particular, their advocacy on a variety of topics. One year it was water, another year it was mental health experience through art, really important. It's a way to shape and reshape what democracy means to us, but also what it could look like in the future. So as we begin this evening's dialogue, I encourage you to listen deeply, to question boldly, and to imagine widely. Think about what democracy means to you, not as an abstract concept, but as something lived, but also shared with everybody in this room and everybody at this university, everybody in this big city that we call home and that we're privileged to be in as an urban university. Democracy that's built day by day through your choices and your engagement. Democracy for me is not a finished project. It's something that we build together, one act of participation. That's the key word. You have to participate meaningfully. And at TMU, we're proud to be a place where that work continues. And I'm privileged to be the provost that helps to lead that with my colleagues, some of whom are here, our Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Amy Peng, and our Vice President of Equity and Community Inclusion, Tony DeMello. So it's a place where that work continues, where learning meets leadership, where curiosity meets courage, and where education is really the foundation for a more just, inclusive, and democratic future. So thank you for the work that you do. And thank you all for joining us tonight for this important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those wise words. I think, you know, the idea that we need to believe in each other is powerful driver of this work, and sometimes that is being challenged today. And I think tonight we will have a chance to hear from 3 young leaders who are engaging, participating fully, engaging the world, and I think is a model for what that can look like at a place, you know, the Obama Foundation, that is really, you know, all about building a future that is one built on justice and one built on inclusion, that is going to, you know, provide some hope, I think, in a time when that can feel really challenged. So I think the leadership that the whole team here at TMU and devotion to this work, I'm extremely grateful for the support that we've had over the years, and the leadership that the university has established itself in this space of democracy across Canada and now increasingly across the world. So without any, I'd like to invite up, I get to first introduce, and then we will invite up our speakers tonight. So tonight we're joined by three of this year's scholars, all Canadians, or all who are tackling complex challenges with creativity and compassion. But the person who will moderate this conversation is a dear friend and someone who I have sort of over the years has been a bit of a guide and champion for this work in a variety of ways. Ika Mompara is our moderator, and he's the Director of National Learning Partnerships at the Rideau Hall Foundation. For more than 2 decades, he has worked across Canada, Tanzania, Kenya, and Cuba, building partnerships that strengthen connections across cultures and communities. At the Ontario Trillium Foundation, where we first got to work together, he led strategic, focused on inclusion and better outcomes for Black and Indigenous youth, and just an all-around extraordinary human. So Ikem is going to moderate. We are joined in this whole event is possible because of the leadership and incredible inspiration of Victoria Kuketz, who is the 2025 Obama Foundation Scholar, among many other things. She's also normally the host of Democracy Dialogues. Today, she gets to sit in the other seat. She is here at TMU, and I think it's really a kudos to TMU for lifting up its community members in a way that they're able to now operate on a world stage in such significant capacity. She has built her career building an inclusive democracy and tackling polarization by building bridges through nonpartisan dialogue. Victoria is a Digital Democracy Fellow at the Public Policy Forum, an alumni of the Civic Action Diversity Fellows, and holds a master's from U of T. And is developing a framework for building trust across the political spectrum, and we'll hear more about that. Michelle Cartier. Michelle is from Bogota, Colombia, brings more than a decade of experience in peace building and inclusive development. She has worked with Colombia's Truth Commission Victims Unit and the UN's Displacement Solutions Fund. As a Rotary Peace Fellow and now an Obama Scholar, Michelle focuses on policies that support communities affected by conflict and displacement. And finally, Khalid Hashi. Khalid is the founder and CEO of OGOW Health, a digital health organization transforming maternal and child health outcomes through inclusive, community-driven innovation. His work has been recognized globally with partnerships with UNICEF and awards such as the Global Peace Prize and the Muslims Achieving Excellence Social Entrepreneur of the Year. Extraordinary folks. And finally, we get to call them up to have a conversation here with you and through you. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. Good to meet you all. Thank you very much to the TMU team, John, for having us, and Victoria for lending me your chair so that I can be a part of the conversation today. As you heard, yes, my name is Ikem. I come here from my people are the Igbos of southeastern Nigeria. Igbo is the name of the land, is the name of the people, it is the name of the language, and it is from there that I bring, with honor and humility, greetings from those who have been here before us. And it's with that voice and with that sort of leaning into storytelling and lifting up the voices of people that we're hoping to engage in this conversation with you all today around democracy and around some of the work that these three amazing scholars have been doing. So we met a little bit before today, and we have some questions that I'm planning to ask them. There's one that they don't know that I'm going to ask them that I literally just came up with, and it's about food. John knows me very well. He knows that food is a central theme in all of the work that I do. So I want you to think about this, but not answer it yet. Answer it whenever you want across this conversation. What is a dish, a meal, that for you, that's what you think of when you think of democracy? Okay? A meal, a dish, whether it's the eating of it, the cooking of it, what makes up that meal and what it means to you, that to you, this is what democracy can be, ought to be, or isn't. Your call. You can go with it first, or you can pepper that into your answers. Okay? But I'm going to start with one of our first questions, and you can go ahead and introduce yourselves and go with that. Each of you have come to the Obama Foundation with very different backgrounds and life experiences. Why? What led you to tackle the things that you have done? And really, what keeps you going? I'm going to start with you.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Michelle Cartier. I'm Canadian Colombian, and I've mostly worked in Colombia for my whole life. And what brings me here? Well, I don't know if everyone's familiar with this, but my country has been at war or has suffered from internal conflict for over 5 decades. And that has left over 9 million internally displaced people, which is people who have been forced to leave their homes, but not the country. And I remember when I was 8 or 9, growing up in Bogota, the capital of my country, and starting to see people holding cardboards on the streets, whole families with children, with older people saying they had been displaced. And I think I was too young to actually understand what was going on. And it was my mother who taught me and explained me what was going on. And by doing that, I think she also taught me about injustice, about outrage at that injustice, and about how there's always something that you can do about that. So turning that outrage into action. So I think that was like the start of everything.
Okay. That was a launch. Okay. What about you, Khalid?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Khalid Hashi, and I lead an organization named Ugo Health. Ugo actually means to know in the Somali language. What led me to my work was actually a first-hand encounter navigating the health systems in Somalia. I went to Somalia for the very first time to meet my only living grandparent and the first grandparent that I'd ever get the opportunity to meet. And we met over her lack of medical records. I was actually tasked there to transfer my grandmother to Istanbul to seek specialized care. And I would transcribe her medical records every day using WhatsApp and inform my mother back in Edmonton, Alberta, of her conditions. And I was quite frustrated about the process. Of course, the healthcare worker was frustrated. I was frustrated, and my family was as well. But the ecosystem supporting my grandmother was frustrated equally. And the doctor there actually challenged me and said, "Why don't you do something about it?" So the first thing I thought about was, let me fundraise. So I went on my Instagram story and I asked my community, "Hey, let's create a GoFundMe. Let's send some money back to this hospital." And one of my friends actually challenged me and said, "How do you know the money would actually go towards what you intend?" So then I started thinking, and I thought maybe innovation and technology would work. So we built a prototype, we've implemented it, and now it's supporting over 1,000 facilities across the entire country, close to 1 million beneficiaries. And we're working with a consortium of partners, Save the Children, UNICEF, Action Against Hunger, and of course, local and regional governments to help make this work happen. And we do it through 3 different ways. So we support mothers and caregivers through social behavior change messaging. So we inform them of where and when to go for services, health workers through applications, and governments through data, through dashboards, so they can better plan.
Nice. So you saw the potential for action and you took it. All right, Victoria.
Thanks so much. And first, I just want to say hi to all of you. There's so many people from the communities that I've worked with over the years, dear friends, my family, people like Trevor, who I worked with over the years. And so it's amazing to be here with all of you. And can I also just say, how amazing are my new friends, right? I'm so proud to have them here. I think some of you know the story, but I'll share it for those who are joining us tonight. And thank you again for coming. You know, I graduated about 10 years ago. I started volunteering with John Beebe, who was my first career sponsor ever. So thank you, John. And we sat in grassroots communities with people who experienced barriers to voting, you know, women's living in shelters, newcomers, accessibility communities, indigenous communities. We worked with incarcerated electors who, you know, for anyone who might be joining us from the States, and we tell this in the States all the time, are given the right to vote here. And 7 different segments of people who experience barriers, both physically and informationally, to voting. And it was the most humbling experience of my entire life, because you can't go in and talk about democracy if someone hasn't eaten that day. You can't go in and talk about democracy and encourage people to vote until you've made sure that the woman living in the shelter, you know, her address needs to be redacted so that her life isn't at risk when she goes to the polling stations. And so I went to work at Elections Ontario after that, because I led the outreach and provincial education portfolio to ensure I could do my part and really just put one foot in front of the other, though it was scary, though there were a lot of unknowns. I made a lot of mistakes, but I actually really believed in the promise of democracy and what it gave people. My goal ever since then has been to make democracy as well known, as understood as power and freedom. I don't think we're there yet, but I think the more we talk about it, the better we do. And I knew I had something to offer, but I didn't have a lot of power or position myself. And so I had people who really powerfully sponsored me to work at the Public Policy Forum, to start creating pathways for nonprofits and community leaders to have a voice at those tables, because they didn't, and it was wrong. And policies were being made about their lives that they were not consulted on them, it did not benefit them, it did not serve them. And so I was a little audacious, but I challenged the people at PPF, and they hired me to make those pathways. And so all that to say, I scaled a project on polarization that, again, started with community, because all of you have the answers to all the problems we face, no one else. And that allowed me to go back into community, to scale those conversations, to be able to really understand what Canadians were suffering around and the immense pressures they were feeling in their lives. And that's what's led me to Obama Foundation. I'm here with the foundation now to build a project on how we build trust at the hyper-local level. So I'll be bothering all of you. I'll be sliding into your DMs and inboxes to ask you your opinions and get you involved in some of my work. And I just, you know, I think the major thing I want to say is we didn't start out with the intention of being here. We started out because we wanted to put one foot in front of the other and make local interventions, and not just admire or complain about problems, but to say, what can I do to fix them? Or at least try.
I love that invitation to solutions, right? And that's kind of one of the themes that we talked about, was how we move from diagnosing a problem, identifying what the themes around it are, and rallying the support and the intellect that you can bring together, and the resources, of course, power, access, and all of it, to start tackling those problems, right? And you've all kind of identified the motivations, you know, seeing internally displaced people in Colombia, seeing navigating the ecosystem of health supports in Somalia, and all of the trust and mistrust and distrust of institutions, and how you move that forward in, you know, Canada, Somalia, and in Colombia. In the work that we do at the Riddell Foundation, a lot of it has to do with nation building and connecting people together to build a stronger, more caring nation. Canada uniquely is interesting in that sense, as you're doing the nation building in Canada. All of us here have some connection to somewhere else as well. So that nation building also pulls along some of the things that you're talking about in Colombia, in Somalia, and globally. So in this moment, we're talking to you 3 as Canadian scholars who are part of this in an amazing experience. What do you think it says about Canada's place globally that you 3 are the ones doing this work right now? What do you think of it for Canadians, and what we can be thinking about and doing and expecting of each other and our place in the world? I'll start with you again, Michelle.
I chose the wrong seat, I guess. Well, I really liked something that someone told me about this program, because as you can you can see we come from very different backgrounds. We work on very different things. And someone told me that this program with the Obama Foundation at Columbia University was not based on projects or individuals, but values. So I think the values are, are that common element that brings us together. And it's like, as Victoria was saying, how to work to make people's lives a little bit better. And I know we're in the middle of this very tough global situation right now, and it can be very discouraging. But I don't know, like being in this program and meeting my fellow scholars just reinsures that there's also a lot of people working on this still and resisting and taking up action. So I would say that, as you mentioned, it talks about diversity, how we're all Canadian and we're all also related or attached to another country. So it's diversity that's also brought to the program, but also how to work from the local processes to preserve democracy, to preserve community work, community bonds, even if this context might be discouraging or like hopeless.
Victoria, in the spaces that you're navigating through the work at PPF, here at TMU, and those transnational conversations, how are you seeing Canada showing up, or how Canada should be showing or could be showing up in this space?
So first of all, I'm so proud that 3 of the 11 of us are Canadian. I think that really says something about the values we bring and the representation and the vision we bring too. I would say that, the world convenes in Canada. We have, if you go on the subway or even in this room, I bet you we have, at least 20 different nations represented here. And I think that that is the beauty of Canada. That's the project of Canada. It's also the difficulty of Canada, right? I think Barack Obama himself says that democracy is much easier in places where everyone's the same. But I think there's a unique challenge here to be able to work through difference, to be able to create community with someone who comes from somewhere totally different, who speaks a different language, who cooks in a way that makes, kitchen sense different than yours, to negotiate values, to, have different faiths, have churches next to one another, and to be able to cultivate respect. I think that's what Canada is, right? And so I think that that is our place on the world stage, to show that this beautiful, difficult, messy, critical project that we're all so incredibly proud of is something that the world can really take notice of. And I also think it's important for us to be vulnerable around the fact that it's not easy. If we see some of the world's biggest conflicts are manifesting in the communities here, and they're carrying the burden and the weight and the pain and the suffering and the anger of it too. And so how can we really show up for these people and help them continue to believe in the project of Canada as well, and then represent that on the world stage?
Thank you, Khalid. In the innovation space that you're dealing with, building ecosystems around health interventions and all of that stuff, how are you seeing that playing out as well from a Canadian perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for innovation and global health, just in general, when it comes to that intersection of technology, Canada has played a significant role in the past, I would say, decade. The grand challenge is Canada has an amazing innovation fund that we were actually so fortunate to be a part of. So this year, they funded a lot of our work, being a Canadian innovator and one of, I believe, 10, this cohort, to really scale up our work to not just Somalia, but other contexts as well. But the Obama Foundation, I think this year selecting 3 Canadians is, like Victoria mentioned, something to really celebrate. We're in our 8th cohort now. There was 1 Canadian last year. And the reason why we actually traveled all the way from New York to be here today is to really share this amazing opportunity, and hopefully next year see an increased percentage of Canadians enrolled in this prestigious program. And one of the amazing opportunities has really been a platform that is really amplifying our work, and a opportunity to share other challenges that are important to us, really even outside of the solutions that we're working in and the work that we lead every single day.
Like what?
So for me, I would talk about issues like around global health outside of just Somalia. Like right now, a passion project of art for me individually is just supporting Syria. So I've met remarkable community health workers in those communities and finding ways in which to build partnerships. Actually, a member of our cohort, Valentina from Argentina, actually connected me with government officials from those communities. So now we're actually seeing how we can potentially explore scaling up our solutions there.
Okay, connecting. Michelle, I'm gonna pick on you again. You're closest to me. Khalid was just talking about examples of how that work is happening in community. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the work that you are doing and your work in Colombia, and how is the transformation happening, and what are the questions that you're asking through that work?
Sure. So when I was talking about my mother a long time ago, after that, the path has brought me to work in the public sector in Colombia and also with United Nations, helping design the policies to respond to internal displacement. And in my last job before moving to New York, I was overseeing a project working with communities of internally displaced people and host communities to bring them together. And specifically in a provincial capital called Quibdó, which is one of the poorest cities in Colombia that has grown by receiving internally displaced people. We were working there, and I mean, there's reasons to be disappointed by the government. These people have been living there after being displaced for over 10, 15, 20 years, and they still showed up every time we were holding meetings, workshops, and they allowed themselves to dream about a better community for themselves, for their children, for their families. So for me, the resilience of the people we were working with, Victoria was mentioning the importance of not designing policies without the people, says something, because there's no way that you sitting in Bogota in an office could know what people need better than what they do. So the fact of seeing them there every time, writing documents, mapping their cities, their needs, handing them the documents to local authorities, keeping local authorities accountable, for me, it shows that people care, that people resist, that people can still organize themselves to keep these institutions accountable, because in the end, governments change every 4 years. This government that is in office right now will change in 2 years. So in the end, it's these local processes led by these communities, the ones that are going to ensure that something can actually change. So for me, that was very powerful. It was about building trust. It was about people believing in what we were saying, but also listening to them. We weren't the ones leading the process, but just giving them platform. And I think that's a very interesting and different way of thinking how to design and implement public policies.
I love that. I think one of the things that I'm curious about with that is how you take that local voice, doing democracy from the ground up, taking a very hyper-local approach, and seeing to what extent that scales. Is it possible to scale it? Is it a good idea to scale it? And that's kind of where the three of you, when I look at your bios and the work that you're doing, that intersection point around local and global and how you're moving through them. At the global scale, it's easier, I think, for things to get very theoretical, right? It's easier for them to get, you kind of lose a little bit, it's less tactile at the global scale. I think I was going to ask this of Khalid and Victoria, if you can talk to us a little bit about how are you experiencing that? Like taking something so specific as the task that you went to Somalia to deal with your grandmother, and then now that has scaled into something that is working with, governments and regions and all of that kind of stuff. How are you staying connected to it at its most local and granular level?
Yeah, so I mean, the primary essence of our work is grounded in local realities. It was me actually being in Somalia within a clinic, identifying a problem on the ground, but also knowing I may not be best suited to solve that problem alone, or if at all. The first thing I had to do was really understand the larger ecosystem of what's happening, and understanding that this particular issue in the clinic, is this a reality happening across the district and the region? Are there other solutions happening that I may not know about? And how do I also increase my understanding of the issue? Of course, one thing I really knew was I could mobilize funding really well.
Okay.
And I had a community of diaspora Somalis here in Canada that I could pull in and help share the challenge that I've seen. And I think that's one thing that I've done quite well. But it was right around the time we came across actually a grant by Open IDEO. So IDEO, they're leaders in human-centered design thinking.
Right.
And it was a global innovation challenge. 90 countries applied. We were fortunate to be one of 5 countries selected. And that opportunity allowed us to travel across Somalia for 6 months. So I went to 6 regions, spent 6 months me on the ground. I had to polish up my Somali language, which I was a bit embarrassed about because I thought it was quite good. And I led workshops. Over the last 8 years, I spent 6 months out of the year in Somalia. I had to leave my job at Habitat for Humanity. My employer seen me on CBC and they were like, what are you doing every 6 months? So I actually unfortunately had to, and it was a great opportunity because I had to be close to the ground. Of course, raising the issue and the stories that I hear on the ground to a global stage, whether that's applying for health investment portfolio funding, also connecting investment funding, not just for the work we're doing, but health system strengthening. We invest in district health officers trainings. We train 2,000 health workers in Somalia, a task force. And I'm speaking to a lot of the funders that I meet in spaces like this, right?
Okay.
Sharing their stories and then figuring out if there's synergies and making those connections. So yeah, we're just like
Nice.
a bit of a convener, but there's
Yes.
a lot of people around the work.
That's a skill. That's a skill. That's a superhero skill. Victoria, what about you?
I think before I offer my perspective, I just want to say, like, what if Khalid had just tuned out on his phone that day at his grandmother's appointment? You know, like, I just feel like how many of us have done a chore that didn't actually feel that fun or that interesting, but we did it because we do things for our family. But what if he had headphones on and he wasn't listening and nothing ever came of that important moment? And I just think for me, sorry to butter you up here, but it's really inspirational to hear about someone who made like that local intervention and is changing health outcomes for people across a whole country that he represents. So you're cool. Yeah. I'll just say very quickly a couple of things. Number one, being in New York and the amazing way that the Obama Foundation is putting us in conversations and letting us meet people who can be so powerfully instructive to us is diminishing that division between global and local. We're actually hearing from, you know, Columbia administrators under Chatham House rule about how they're negotiating for university funding with the Trump administration and trying to seek some alignment there. We're actually hearing about what it was like to try and keep, you know, those in the encampment safe, but also understanding there was a job to do there as an administrator, and then also negotiate, you know, with the NYPD. Like, these are not easy things, and people who have worked really hard and risen in the ranks of their professions are there, and they're not that different than us. They're tasked with huge responsibilities. So maybe, you know, that's my reflection on how the global becomes local. And then I think in terms of one thing I've been able to offer is how we do community engaged work in a way that's respectful. Like, I'll be honest and say I was petrified of getting this wrong because I didn't want to let people down. I didn't want to use them. I didn't want them to say, oh, you came to speak to me about this issue and then I never heard from you again. And so I consulted with people, you know, Trevor, I'm going to pick on you again. I called Trevor and I said, you know, can I build trust with you over a period of time so I can speak to the young people that you work with so that you trust me to be able to talk to them? And we compensated them. We didn't just say like, oh, you're invited to this random round table and I don't really care about the particulars of your life. We paid them $100 to come and speak because their voices mattered, their opinion counts, and they were working. And so that was a way to build trust as well. Then, you know, we anonymized things so that they could speak safely to us. And there was a whole kind of step-by-step process that we did to build integrity and safety in the work. And then at the end, because so many people said that when they speak to people, they never hear from them again, John actually created the environment for a national online town hall where everybody who was part of this project could come back, have the work presented to them. And in a national global setting with TMU, thank you TMU, we took the hard questions. Why didn't this make into it? What happened to this recommendation? Thank you for doing this part. This is someone else that I think you should speak to, or I have a major critique. We did it all publicly because that's what accountability is about. So I feel like I could go on and on, but I feel like that's one thing that, you know, I've been able to bring to the cohort, and I feel proud of it.
I like where this is going, and incidentally, somewhat intentionally, we haven't talked a lot about democracy writ large. We've talked about a lot of the things that make up democracy. Part of what in reading your bios and your work that I found very interesting is that the focus has shifted away from the electing behavior that we sometimes think about in democracy. And all of what you've talked about is the actual human-to-human connection, doing things and saying things and engaging with people that makes community better, which is what I would argue is the more powerful aspect of what democracy is, as opposed to the part, which is very important, of figuring out who's going to be in office over X number of years. But trust being that central currency that we negotiate of our relationships. Victoria, you mentioned this a couple of times just now. Can you talk a little bit then about what institutions in your work and in the conversation that you're having you would like to see change or transform in an interesting way for us to build back a little bit more trust in our democratic processes or the institutions in that space?
Okay, so this is where I'm going to be sassy, and I'm going to say all of them
Okay.
with respect.
I'm gonna hold you to picking one.
Okay. Okay. I would say government. And I have deep respect for government officials. I worked in the public service myself. I know how hard it is. I know how under-resourced it is. But at the baseline, government services should work for citizens who are taxpayers and who they're accountable to. I don't think that happens all that often. And so I think that there has to be a real reckoning in the public service to say that we have to be citizen-centric first. We have to create services that work and that matter. We have to consult with them. We have to be responsive. And I think if people really see that in practice and through more public interaction, then I think there will be greater levels of trust. And so again, like, I know how hard it is.
Mhm.
But, you know, you should be able to swipe your card at the TTC and get in at the exit you need to get in. You should be able to have service level responses when you email an institution within 2 days. This is how the public puts their faith in you and builds a trusting relationship. And if we're able to do that, we're going to have much better social cohesions and greater outcomes in this country.
So fundamentally reimagining and retooling government to do what it says and what it's set up to do for people.
You said it.
That seems easy. I'm joking. It does not seem easy or sound easy at all. But I think the biggest way to move that forward is our own action and how we as citizens and individuals, and I use citizen in the sense of, you know, humanity, people who are in a space, how we participate in what government is and how we hold our government responsible for doing what it is designed to do and what it has the capacity to do when we adequately resource it with our talent, our minds, our criticism, and our treasure as well. So maybe in closing, if the three of you can share what are the things you could suggest to people to do, sort of how we can be even more engaged than we already are. Now, this is a pretty engaged audience already. You're here, the Jays are playing, all of this is happening, but maybe they haven't started, I don't know. I don't understand baseball yet. But you already are an engaged audience, but what else? What more can we do? Or how can we be more laser focused in how we can nudge these institutions, nudge our democratic system to be more of what it can be? I'm going to start with you again, Michelle.
Okay. I would say, as Victoria was saying, to understand that government is not something abstract, far away from us. Like, institutions are made by people. I mean, people work there and they can change. So, I mean, from my personal experience, I feel when I was in high school, they didn't teach me much about how government worked, honestly. And well, we learned about history, we learned about math, but not really about government. And so I think it should start in school, it should start in families, like how to teach young people, children, how government works and what government is. Stop thinking that when we talk about democracy or environmental awareness or justice, we're talking about abstract things, like it's the society we want to build and we want to live in the present, not in the future. So also stop saying for future generations, like it has to happen now, but I would say it should start by us talking to our neighbor, to our colleague, to be interested and engaged in what's happening around us, to participate in the platforms and the processes that surround us, and to care, I would say, to understand that these things matter for us, even if sometimes it feels far away. Like, yeah, just I would say start by caring.
Caring, I love that. Taking that first step. And we're in a university where, students are, most of them are young, and there's a lot of caring that goes on in universities. One of my professors used to say, when people care, they're loud enough in their criticism of the things that they're going through. If they don't care, that's when you get a lot more apathy, right? There's not a lot of apathy on university and college campuses these days. So Khalid, can you talk about that from, like Michelle just said, from the perspective of what people can do, particularly young people, to continue to be even more engaged to make change?
I think Michelle said it best, right? It all starts with caring. Before you can even care, like you need to be curious of what's happening around you and around the world, and having that open mind and curiosity, I think. And also understanding to start small, right? Like start with what's right in front of you. For me, it was obviously my grandmother and her lack of healthcare. And in that moment, I wasn't thinking about health systems or anything outside of what was happening right in front of me. It was like, this is not right. There needs to be a better way of doing it. And of course, that later led to systems change. Like my organization was very scrappy. In fact, it was a passion project. It was never supposed to be what it is today. And we're learning along the way, but I think it's just finding a cause that you're passionate about, or at times, just being a champion for the work. You don't always need to recreate the wheel or do something new. It's just maybe finding a cause that you deeply care about and figuring out ways you can help support that mission.
Victoria, bring us home. This is usually your seat.
I would say, and you've done a fantastic job, so you're welcome in the seat anytime.
Thank you.
I would say a couple things. Number one, for me, the university is a sacred space. It's a place where you can actually come and debate ideas and learn across disciplines of all different, that leads to all different industries, societies, philosophy, mathematics, everything. So learn across the board. And also don't look for yes people in your life. Look for people who are actually going to really irritate you and press you and push you in your opinions and make you see things on the other side. I think it's really, really easy to surround ourselves with I think many in this room, but I'm not going to assume all are progressives. I think go talk to someone who's different than you. And, I'm not going to say seek to understand. I'm going to say actually get into it with them. Have a healthy argument and figure out where what are the sacrifices both of you can make on each side to move something forward that you care about? Because I actually think that's where we have to go next. We actually have to acknowledge the fact that maybe we aren't going to get along, and that's okay. But we actually really both care about this community center we take our kids to. And so we're going to figure out, how does that get properly resourced? How do their swimming lessons still happen? And I'll respect the fact that we collaborated, but we might never see eye to eye politically. And I actually think that's the work of right now, is to get into that, those difficult situations and ally despite that. That's my thought.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your time, your experience, and what you've learned with all of us. And thank you very much for being a part of the conversation and listening. And that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. So I know none of you have answered the question about food. So go for it. I'm not gonna start with you again. So, Victoria.
Okay, I got a quick one because so many of my family members are here. My mom, my uncle, my cousins.
I'm gonna ask them after. To see.
My grandma's turning 99 soon, and we all rally around her home for the most incredible soup that she makes, and it has all these great vegetables in it. And she makes a veggie version for my mom and for my cousin Asha, and we all just love it. We're fortified by it. It's a thing she makes us when we're sick, and we're so lucky to eat it. So that's it for me.
Amazing.
It's like an amazing like West Indian soup. So like sweet potatoes, okra, like all the good things. You can come over for some.
All right, all right. Got one soup, Khalid.
Okay, mine's very basic. Is samosas are they're big in my culture, but obviously in many other cultures, or there's a lot of common understanding around a samosa and different ways to make it too. So
Michelle.
In Colombia, we have something called bandeja paisa, and I know my friends from Colombia know what that is. It's basically a bunch of things put together on the plate. So you have rice, you have beans, it can be vegetarian, you can have meat, sometimes even eggs. And for me, it's just like bringing a lot of these things together. And when you mix them, it's just better than when you don't, right? So it gives you energy, and yeah, for me, it shows diversity. So I would say
Ekem, what's yours?
Okay.
Putting you in the hot seat.
It's not my favorite, but I'll tell you why. So there's a soup in my part of Nigeria. It's called okra soup. It's made with okra as well. It's messy. It's messy. We eat with our hands. It's almost impossible to eat it and not get yourself dirty. That's how I see democracy. It's hard to eat it with pretenses. You can't eat it with a European suit. You're gonna mess it up. So my approach to it, and that's why I like it, is that we need to bring who we are to all of our shared conversations and get messy a little bit and splash a little bit of sauce on each other. So you can know you got a little bit something. Okay, and that's how you disarm each other and get into making change that is lasting. So thank you very much. Talk to each other, and thank you for having me.